Good afternoon, evening, everyone, and welcome to today's session on form-based codes, the Indian experience. And before we begin, we are always excited to know your coordinates, cities, and countries from whichever place you're joining us today. Especially for a subject such as this, it is always encouraging to see how widely these conversations travel and how they bring together diverse perspectives, making the dialogue richer and more relevant. So please drop us your city in the chat box where you're joining us. Thank you. Over the past decades, we realized that form-based codes approach has increasingly been adopted and explored across various parts of the world as cities search for planning framework that are more responsive to urban character and a quality of place, especially. Indian cities have also been going through an important phase of urban planning reforms. Planning authorities across the country are increasingly adopting tools such as TOD, local area planning, with active encouragement from the union government. And there is a growing recognition that regulation must become more contextual and flexible that could respond to both local character and changing urban realities. This becomes particularly relevant in the Indian context because we have cities closer to natural landscapes, agricultural territories, peri-urban transitions, all requiring a more nuanced planning response. It is therefore taking less time. It is therefore my pleasure to introduce today's speaker, Adarsh Kapoor. He's a co-founder of Creative Footprints and principal urban designer based in New Delhi. He's also an advisor to the World Bank for transit-oriented development projects and a guest faculty at the School of Planning and Architecture in New Delhi. Over the years, he has advised several government agencies on urban design policies, railway station development, and the institutionalization of the form-based code approach in India. Following the presentation, the floor will be also open for interactive discussion session. If you would like to share your views on this subject, raise your hand or have any question for the speaker, please feel free to leave them in the chat box. We will take them up after the speaker's segment, which will be approximately for 40 to 45 minutes. We look forward to hearing Adarsha's insight and how these approaches are being interpreted and integrated within the Indian context. Over to you, Adarsha.
Thank you, Meenakshi. Thank you for the introduction. I'll share my screen, but help me with I won't be able to see you in the screen, so just let me know if everything is visible or not.
Yes, we can see
screen
it.
Visible?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, it's perfect.
Is this perfect? Now I can't see any of you. So if there is anything that you want to tell me, just pop in between and tell me. Yeah.
Definitely. Yeah, we can see your screen. Oh, great.
Thank you everyone for joining, and thank you Institute of Urban Designers India and the Urban Design Group for organizing this. Like Meenakshi introduced, this is mostly a conversation. I will share my experience. I'll share the works that we've done, but the idea is to get involved in the later half of this session on your thoughts, your views, and if there is anything that you would want me to specifically talk about, would happy to cover that. So for the international audience, I also have a brief introduction of the context. For the Indian audience, they might be aware of a lot of this introduction. Just a recap of the development regulations on the Indian context. Then we get into the existing tools of development regulations. We'll be talking about the urban reforms that are happening in India, emergence of form-based codes in this whole context, and what are the Indian parameters of form which are at the forefront of this discussion. Like I said, form-based codes has a very wide application, so we'll be specifically discussing about the Indian experience and what are the cities in India planning to adopt or are in the process of adopting these. Before that, in terms of the context, Indian cities range from Mughal cities, British cities, traditional cities. And over a period of time, there are multiple layers of uh, uh, architecture, urban design, etc., which have added onto the city.
Adarsha,
So,
you're breaking up.
is it? Should I go slower?
It seems to be okay.
Yeah.
Yes.
Anyone else? If there's any lag or any break? Okay. Should I go ahead?
Do
Perhaps
please
it's-
continue. Yes.
So if you look at Calcutta, the historic part of
Perhaps it's my
Calcutta,
side.
yeah. Should I go ahead?
The sound quality is very good here in England.
So the contemporary urban planning in India started post-independence, but we've inherited cities from before, and all these cities, I'll touch upon a few. There are parts which were developed during the Mughal times, traditional times, and even British times. A lot of these parts, which are traditionally old, have a specific form, and that form is what people are able to associate with, which is why these parts of the cities are mostly resilient towards changes, whether it's in the name of heritage regulations, the kind of architecture, the kind of form, but these are the areas which are actually resilient to change. Then we have other parts of the city which are added post independence, and these are the areas which transform very fast, which shows that there is something which has happened after independence which we are not able to capture, which is leading to lack of association with the form of the city. Same with Mumbai. The southern Mumbai is the area where you see the historic form. The historic form is still there apart from a few changes. But the other parts of Mumbai, again, are the areas where transformation is very fast because there is no sense of form over there. There's no sense of urban design and architecture over there. If you look at tier 2 cities, Varanasi being one of the examples, Varanasi again is one of the traditional cities. So the historic part of the city is where you see the traditional form still existing, but there are other parts of the city which doesn't have any reading, any relevant form which people can associate with, these are the areas which transform very fast. Now, what happened post independence is what we need to understand, and where did we miss out in terms of planning regulations. So in India, development regulation, in fact, urban development itself is controlled by acts. So these are legal processes enshrined in, say, a development act, which then establishes a development authority. I'm taking an example of Delhi. The development authority is then mandated to prepare a master plan. Unlike other countries of the globe, in India, the master plan is a legal document. Everything written in the master plan can be quoted in the courts, and any changes to the master plan has to go through legal procedures. The master plans also have something called development control regulations, and then the city authorities issue something called the building bylaws. Both of these are, again, they get their powers from the act itself. So these are also legal documents. So which meant that after independence, a lot of focus was on how to legally create a city. As a result, what was happening is a parallel city was being developed across all states and cities in the country. So you had unauthorized colonies, you had slums, you also had urban villages which were coming up. We somehow failed to read the reasons why these areas were coming up. And over a period of time, now there are ways in which we can read them. And now city authorities are becoming more conscious about how do we address them. And I'll show you examples of how these things can be captured or is being captured. At the same time, when it comes to urban development, while the city authorities were busy in controlling urban development, ensuring that bare minimum parameters of the urban form are controlled, there was private development which was happening, which showed the aspiration of the people. And this is over the last, say, 15 to 20 years where the quality of development has come to the forefront. So before that, the idea was to ensure that we constantly regulate quantity of development, how much to build. But now there is focus on what to build, what should be the quality, and how people are associating this with this quality, whether it's in the form of giving priority to it or in the form of even adding monetary values to it. So say, for example, this is in Gurgaon, one part of Delhi NCR. This is a private development. The whole city, part of a city is built into it. Similarly, parts of Kolkata, New Town, and Salt Lake, you have projects which reflect certain urban design elements. So this is City Center Mall in Kolkata, which was designed by Charles Khorga, and you have the public plaza, street kind of shopping activities, all of these integrated within the design of the shopping area. We also have AeroCity in Delhi, and it's a complex with commercial as well as hospitality industry. So you have a lot of hotels in this complex. You have a lot of workspaces in this complex, and good quality public spaces are being developed over here. There's a price associated with it. It's a prime area, very expensive. So you don't have any affordable components in it, but the quality is what stands out definitely. Now, when we know that development regulations are happening at one side, when city is planning and developing, there's a certain vision that the city puts across. We also know that the private sector people demand a certain quality of urban life. So we have master plans, we have development regulations, we have building regulations, which essentially regulate how much to develop, what is the quantum which needs to be developed. But parallelly, if we start reading the city and try to understand what is the demand of urban form that is being generated, then this discussion becomes very interesting. So what we did was we looked into all the existing tools of development regulation. A lot of these are new age tools added over the last 10, 15 years. So local area planning, TDR, which is transfer of development rights, land pooling. TP scheme has been going on for a long time, and now it's become more mature. Then you have the value creation tools, which is your transit-oriented development, multimodal integration, placemaking schemes. And all of these then adding to the development control regulations and building bylaws. If you look at the first four heads, this is what creates value. And the last head is where value realization happens through value capture financing tools. Now, within this first four parameters is where form-based codes sit in at the moment. And I'll tell you why in India it's been considered in these particular heads. So what happened is in the last, say, 10, 12 years, there was a movement to standardize building bylaws across the country. So the model building bylaws was put across, and modern building bylaws, what it did was it made it mandatory for cities to reform their bylaws and come under the same parameters, or rather similar parameters. Say the discussion was on floor area ratios, ground coverage, height restrictions, etc. At the same time, the urban development sector, the planning sector, was also looking at context-based design tools, which is your transit-oriented development, your development in historic areas, etc. This is where the conflict started emerging, because the uniform building bylaws essentially did not address the context, whereas these new age planning tools, TOD, etc., required a context-specific regulations. To bridge this gap, the form-based codes approach started coming in, and that's the first time when the ministry and the union government also started realizing that there is merit in having a discussion on form-based codes, and we can bring in contextual regulations for cities. This need is not out of the blues. It's actually reflected in a lot of schemes. If you look at the schemes which have come about in the last, say, 10, 12 years, a lot of focus is on improvement of brownfield zones in the city. So brownfield regeneration has come to the forefront. And form-based codes essentially, because it's talking about form and how do you respect the form and enshrine it in the development regulation, is one of the most sought after tools with regards to brownfield regeneration in India. And I'll tell you the parameters later on. So if you look at local area planning, TOD, station development plans, precinct of heritage monuments, green development area. So the demand was already reflected in all of these schemes which the government of India was pushing for. You had the smart city mission, Amrut, Prashad, all of these were looking at parts of the city. How do you improve the public spaces and how do you make them more contextual? Now, in case of India, at the moment when the ministry is pushing for adopting form-based codes, ministry is pushing for the second type of the form-based codes approach. This is the definition from the ministry. So the first one is the conventional type where setbacks, floor space index, height restrictions, etc. are basically governing the form, which we already have. So our development regulations and building bylaws already talk about these. The second is when the layer of interfaces is added onto the form and the quality of form is talked about. Say, for example, the codes or regulations for public spaces, interfaces of plots, introduction of active frontages, building lines, build to line, colonnade. So these are the few parameters of form which the ministry is very keen to push for, because it also encourages people to start using public spaces, walking, cycling, public transit facilities, etc. in the city more actively. And it also addresses a lot of green building requirements. The last one, which is the advanced type of form-based codes, is essentially where a lot of architectural regulations are also brought in. So regulations related to facades, architectural controls, material, color, etc. And the last one is where the Indian side, the Indian regulations don't really encourage the last one. But if, say, for example, there are heritage precincts or precincts which already have pre-decided form or designed form, they're open for adoption of this. Say, for example, cities like Srinagar, cities like parts of the historic parts of Kolkata, historic parts of Lucknow, these areas where there is a certain architectural quality which already exists or is being preserved, there the last one comes into play. So we'll be talking about the second one, which is the hybrid type of form-based codes. Now, what happens is, if you look at the first type of form-based codes, you get the left-hand side kind of urban development, where what happens is the city regulates the quantum. So if you have a plot, the spaces outside the plot are mostly public spaces. Within the plot, you are given certain norms to develop a building, and the norms are as simple as that, as setbacks, how much covered ground can you occupy, and how much built up space that you can create. In this set of regulations, what happens is the interface of the plot with the public space is completely lost and open for interpretation by the architect who designs the plot itself. As a result, the city doesn't get the kind of intended form. All master plans had some kind of form thought of. Now, as a result, the first type only governs the quantum. The second type, which is the hybrid type, also talks about public spaces and interfaces, and it brings it to the forefront of the regulatory discussion. Say, for example, if there's a plot which is getting developed, the plot owner would be aware that there is a footpath in front of it, there is a crossing, there is a green area, a public space. All of those parameters he would be aware of at the time of design of the plot, as well as the plot owner would have a responsibility of designing the plot interface to meet some of the requirements of making the public space more active and usable. Say, for example, introducing an active frontage on some site, introducing colonnades, giving a passage through the plot. These kind of parameters are encouraged in this second approach. This is not new for India. This has been there for ages. And I'll show you examples from India where we've been able to capture all these parameters of the form from various parts of the country. So I'll just very quickly touch upon some of the cities. So if you look at Leh is basically a cold desert, and most of the development in Leh, the traditional development, was in response to the climatic condition. And as a result, you have a certain definition of form. Vrindavan, again a traditional town, had a certain response to the culture of the place. As a result, it has a specific kind of a form. Gift City, mostly new. This one again was a response to the financial capital requirement of the city and the region. As a result, it has a certain definition of the form. This Gift City is the only one where form-based codes has been used formally. All the others are mostly in response to either culture, climate, or any other kinds of local requirement. I'll be discussing about Gangtok, Chennai, and Pune. I'll be sharing some of the learnings from there in the later part, but the first three we haven't touched upon in this particular example. We also looked into the master plans and bylaws. In master plan, we compared the master plan with certain requirements of form, and we saw that some of the parameters of the form are present in the master plans. Some of them require rearticulation and some of them are absent. We also compared it with the URDPFI. So URDPFI guidelines is essentially the urban regional development plan and plan formulation and implementation guideline. I'm sorry if the full form is, I'm wrong with the full form. I'm sorry about that. But essentially, this is kind of a Bible for any kind of planning exercise in India. So all cities follow the URDPFI guidelines to formulate their master plans, their development regulations. And similarly, we have the model building bylaws, something that I showed you earlier. So model building bylaws, again, is a document which recommends parameters for building bylaws for the city. So it's not that the form-based codes discussion is absolutely new for India. There have been parameters which were there in the master plan. More work with regards to quality is essential. Similarly with building bylaws. So building bylaws also, there are examples across these cities where we've seen that some of the parameters exist, some of them need rearticulation, and some of them are completely absent. I'll show these later on as well. Now I'll come to some of the cities, and the reason why I'm showing you through this visual form is because, in a lot of cases, when we have this discussion on form-based codes, the first reaction from anyone is that this is illegal or this cannot happen in India, because the conventional mindset is to look at the first kind of conventional form-based code. So if it's legally allowed, then it's possible. If it's legally not allowed, it's not possible. But when we go to the cities, when we look at some parts of the cities, we realize that people have shown the demand for certain kinds of regulation. And whatever I'll show you now is from the studies of the city. Formally, a lot of this is considered illegal in the building bylaws, and we don't know why. That's the most surprising part. But if we look at its application and if we look at its needs, then you will see that yes, there's no reason to make it illegal. This is an example of Guwahati in Assam. This is Pan Bazaar area of Guwahati, and a lot of commercial establishments over there. They've converted their front setback into public spaces. You may have some parking, etc., but essentially the front setback is used as a public space. And this is a practice in a lot of other cities as well. So Kolkata, another eastern city, that also uses the front setback as a public space. Georgetown, Chennai, this is an example of a building, a commercial building, where we have a passage through the building. Again, legally, our bylaws don't acknowledge this as a parameter of form. So they don't give any incentive for any particular building giving these kind of passages, public passages through the private plot. But recently, in a lot of building bylaws, the new changes are actually giving incentives for anyone leaving these kind of passages for people. So this is a public passage through a building. So you have commercial on the ground floor, you have residences on top, you have entries, lifts, etc. from the lower passage. And this actually enhances the efficiency of a high density area. And this is also an old part of the city. This is an example of Gangtok, and this passage that you see, again, this is also through private plots. But this, interestingly, is through a series of private plots. So the development regulations do not acknowledge this. But the moment this is being acknowledged, you get additional pedestrian passages, shortcuts through these kind of areas. This is a hilly terrain, which is why you are seeing steps. You see these kind of examples in Kargil and Leh as well. Gangtok, we also saw this, where footpaths actually get connected at various levels with public spaces. So you have this one continuous footpath which passes through this commercial area. These are all vending stalls. It crosses, it goes straight onto the footpath, crosses the road and goes to the other side. All of this actually makes the whole area very walkable. Something that most of the building bylaws in our country absolutely restrict is connection across road right of ways. And a lot of our traditional cities, a lot of our contemporary cities, especially in areas which are hilly, their connection across road right of ways actually are very good, and they enhance the efficiency of the form. So the new building bylaws in a lot of cities have started allowing this, provided that they meet fire requirements and other safety requirements. And this is now becoming one of the most important change in the bylaws. Boundary walls. In fact, most of our building bylaws, they start with laying down the norms for boundary walls. This is an example of Chennai, and this is the financial district, the hub of Chennai. And what you see on your left are headquarters, big work centers, offices, etc. You don't see a boundary wall, but you see a clear distinction between the private space and the public right of way. So the footpath actually is continuous and it doesn't pose any safety concerns, etc. Across the road, you have same stretch. Across the road, you have the LIC building, Life Insurance Corporation of India building. They have their public dealing office on the ground floor. So they've used the front space, the setback space of the building as a waiting space for people. And then you have the footpath. All of this is, by the way, otherwise not encouraged by the bylaws. In Pune, we have these kind of blocks where you have footpaths through the colonnades and you have the development on top of it. So footpath is actually a part of the private space. Most building bylaws in India right now don't talk about colonnades. And colonnades, considering the kind of climatic condition we are in, India needs a lot of shaded footpath. So this actually is one of the most important element of form that we've somehow missed. Pune also has a lot of perimeter blocks and perimeter blocks with active frontages. Now, this discussion of perimeter block with active frontage is actually quite relevant in the context of transit-oriented development, because a lot of cities are implementing transit-oriented development, and they are encouraging, within the regulations, they are encouraging active frontage. And then there is a parallel discussion that how do we have access to parking for these areas? So Pune and Indore also has shown us examples that if you have perimeter blocks, you can have access to the parking from the block and you can have the parking just behind it. This is an example of Gangtok. A lot of our cities, especially the hilly areas, we have very high requirement of multi-level car parking spaces. And these multi-level car parking spaces are absolutely dingy, dark, and most of the bylaws don't encourage any kind of commercial activity within these parking areas, which is where, if you look at the actual reality, you'll see there's a huge demand of these kind of commercial activities within the parking spaces, because one, it brings in amenities, facilities, and two, it also makes the area safe. So this is an example of Gangtok. We found similar examples in Panbazar, Assam, and we also found similar examples in Pune. Mix of use. There's a lot of concerns with regards to mix of use. Again, this is something that encourages a certain quality of form. Mix of use, this is an example of Pune, where we have shops on the ground floor. We have school right on top of it. On the left-hand side, we have a residential block. And on top of the school, you have the play area of the school. So these kind of mixes have been experimented in our older parts, and they function really well because for someone who has a house in the residential building next to it, it's very easy to send the child to the school right next to the house. So these kind of mixes also add value to the kind of form that we are discussing. Pune also has shown very good examples of how to treat the corners. So most of their corners are either these kind of rounded corners or chamfered corners. They have very high commercial value, and as a result, they generally don't build boundary walls at the corners. So this may be an outlet of a restaurant, outlet for a bank. So these kind of variations are very actively visible over there. In Guwahati, we also saw a very good response to climatic condition. So facades which were facing the western sun, they had these kind of fenestrations, fins, and shaded facades. In other examples, in fact, this one, a corner block. So one facade has a different treatment as well as the other facade has a different treatment. That's purely because they face different directions. With regards to heritage, again, Pune has shown a very good example of defining heritage, defining what to do with the heritage and how much to retain, what can be allowed for change, etc. So these things actually add a lot of value to the kind of urban form that we are looking at. Pune also has these kind of cases where new developments have started coming in next to the older historic development. There are also cases again in Pune. So you have a lot of types of examples from Pune. So you have these kind of buildings where adaptive reuse has also been done. Most building bylaws are silent about response to historic areas, response to heritage. So now there's a lot of discussion on how do we institutionalize all of this. So while this was the background of what we did, how do we study the parameters of form, we got a chance to work with first Indian Railways and then with the National Institute of Urban Affairs to structure a set of tools and parameters for cities to adopt form-based codes. And it was essentially a set of guidelines, manuals. The cities could then use it to learn and make their own sets of regulations. Because like I showed you, there's no unique way of identifying the parameters of form. Every city may bring in new parameters and unique parameters for the city itself. So the broader approach was very straightforward. The area-based planning of certain areas have to be very robust. The city, while it can have unified bylaws, it should also have contextual area-based regulations. Because the cities were working on local area plans, it was easier for them to integrate it. Then all of this would start giving a sense of urban design and urban vision for the city, which can then be broken down into various parameters of form, the urban form regulations, and I'll show you these. Say, for example, if we look at the local area plan, the local area plan already is capturing a lot of information. The only parameters which are missing in the local area plans are related with how do we articulate form and how do we read the form. So if those parameters are added to these overlays, then it becomes easier for city to adopt this. We've done this kind of work for UP. Something similar with regards to this is also happening in Delhi. So cities are taking their own time to figure out how do they want to adopt this. These kind of overlays and the local area plans then give genesis to the form regulations. And while all of this is shown in simplified graphic, each component that you see highlighted is one parameter of the form. Say, for example, how do you define a junction? How do you define a mid-block crossing? How do you define street layouts? When we talk about green areas, which ones are natural greens, which are man-made greens, what all can be allowed in the man-made greens, what all can be allowed in natural greens. And the idea is to bring all this in the forefront of urban regulations and urban development, rather than keeping it at the backdrop. Then if there's a plot which abuts the waterfront, then what are the regulations for those? Interface, I explained earlier, active frontages, vehicular passages, colonnades, built to line. A lot of these are now being adopted. Uh, uh, Other kinds of regulations which are emerging from your heritage regulations are also integrated. So view corridors, vision cones, facade controls, all of these start coming in. Now, to operationalize all of this, we've not reached this stage in the urban development sector. We are still here, where cities have started experimenting and exploring and adding these parameters in the building regulations. Over a period of time, they'll reach a point where then there'll be a demand for how do we make sure that all of this is user friendly and integrated in the building sanctions. So that's where property development cards and interfaces, in India we call them ease of doing business. I don't know why, but most building plan interfaces portals are called ease of doing business portals. So form-based codes can then be integrated with these portals as well. An example of this is how railways used it. So railways actually, this is from how railways started tendering their projects. So they started creating these kind of property development cards. So for each plot, they would have these kind of regulations uh, with regards to the form, and essentially highlighting the most important parts. Say, for example, which is the active frontage, where do they need the passage through the plot, what is the overall volume that can be developed, and that's it. So I stop here, and we can now have questions.
Thank you, Adarsha. It's been, really great and detailed way of looking at our forms and cities through the lens of, from an urban designer architecture perspective. We've got a couple of questions. Before we open the discussion or questions, I would just put forward this thing that since this forum encouraged the discussion, so we will maintain that it will be part of discussion rather, a kind of argument or things like that. So I'll open first question, I believe, from Yogesh. People's aspiration appear to be driven by a Western aesthetic. Is that fair to say? And definitely, Yogesh, you can open your mic and have a discussion, and then we can continue with the other questions. Yogesh.
Hi. Sorry. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hi. Thanks, Adarsha. That was really sort of just still processing the presentation. There's a lot of information there. Thank you for that. So the earlier examples that you gave, like Dorjan, what I noticed, so it reminds me of a conversation that I had with like some Indian designers where they're sort of copying, not copying, but they're inspired by, say, Western architecture, but Western architecture is based on European climate, and so what sort of my acquaintances in India are saying is they don't really deal with the Indian climate, the monsoon, the heat. So yeah, I just wanted to. I suppose you talked about it in the rest of your presentation with the colonnades, the having more shading, etc. But in terms of, is there I don't know, the question is probably more like psychological in terms of the middle class when they're aspiring to live in a certain place. Have they mentally kind of latched onto a Western aesthetic to, that's the sort of place that you should aspire to live in, for example. I'm not quite sure if I explained that.
You're right. I mean, we can't we can't help it. The Western images look very neat and sanitized, and you saw the Indian images. There's a lot of clutter in the images. The form may be more efficient in our case for our condition, but still, spaces which have so much of advertising, so much of people moving around, and there might be some issues with regards to cleanliness. Those are not kind of images that people can aspire for. But at the same time, our job is to figure out how do we keep making it better, even with the kind of clutter that there is. So the moment you start discussing these parameters uh, on a forum where you associate value with it, then you see the merit. Say, for example, a lot of developers charge preferred location charge in India for apartments overlooking green areas, water bodies, and any other kind of facility. So there is a value associated with a view that you are getting from the apartment. That is a very good hint to say that people actually can pay extra if you give them that kind of a public environment. This particular philosophy has never been capitalized by the public sector, the sector which is actually involved in development regulations.
Okay.
They've never charged extra for having a good quality public space in front of a house, even in municipal bylaws or property taxes. But now they've started realizing that, if the development sector or the planning agency start thinking like a developer, then they'll start associating value with everything that they're doing. At the moment, that hasn't happened. So let us see. So there's a lot of gap between what people aspire for and what the cities provide for. And that gap will fill over a period of time. At least I'm happy that at least some of these parameters now the cities have started realizing that there is a value to it. So instead of having those rudimentary setbacks, now the cities have started introducing building line and build to edge. So you build up to that line so that the city gets a street frontage. Then they have also introduced clauses for active frontage and colonnade. That again introduces a certain kind of an urban form. Baby steps, small steps, but I feel that it's a good starting point because, like I said, it's time consuming to change a legal document. It can't happen over a day or two. There has to be a phasing to it. So that's the reason why things would take some amount of time, and I'm hopeful that it will happen over a period of time.
Yeah, thank you.
And by the way,
Great.
I specifically used Indian studies to bring out the Indian parameters.
Yeah.
There was a lot of pressure on us to look at international cases. We did do international studies. In fact, one of my team members was able to go across Europe and document these forms. Pretty pictures, very good pictures. Something that you can aspire for. But the moment you put that image across to an Indian audience, they are like, "Ye India mein, sorry, this cannot happen in India."
No,
As a result, we said that no, we have to take Indian examples. No matter how ugly it looks like, we have to take an Indian example and we have to highlight the parameter that touches them the most.
Just in association with this question, Adarsha, I was thinking rather we are moving from cities have explored that form-based codes are more necessary to reveal the urban character and make more contextual-based approach, and have infrastructure also realize this. Has this communication has gone towards that, because our projects from urban design or planning, we associate with different consultant. Has that been communicated in your projects you come across, or it's yet? I'm definitely long way to go, but has that been started?
It has been started, but we are very slow. Let's just say that. We are very slow.
Great. So next question, I think we have a couple of questions from Vijay. Vijay, I think we'll open the floor for you. However, I would just suggest you pick one question or two perhaps, and then we can definitely get back other questions at the end of the session, because we have received a couple of more questions. Vijay, would you like to open up your mic?
Sure, I'll give
Please
it a
take one
go.
or two, and then we'll come back to you again. And I appreciate your questions. It's really moving for the session.
So who decides on these form-based codes? Is it politicians, civil servants, property developers, urban design professionals, architects? bankers? Who comes up with it? Because I mean, is it something that comes from the center? Some politician will get together with his friends and say, "Oh, we're going to make this area a special development zone." Then all their friends go in and buy up the land. I mean, is it rigged, or is it open, democratic, and transparent?
In Indian case, these kind of regulations are the mandate of the state or the city authorities. Essentially the state, and then the state delegates the city development authorities to prepare these and get them approved. That's one thing. The second thing is, because we are talking about very basic parameters, the development authorities within the cities are actually integrating these with the building bylaws and development control regulations. At the moment, there's not much political interference in all of this. But mostly it's the planners who are making these development regulations and the changes in the bylaws. The urban designers are involved only in a few cities or states. Say, for example, in Mumbai, you have the urban designers involved with the development authorities. In Bangalore, I think the urban designers are involved with the development authorities. In some of the other cities or states, urban designers have been engaged as external consultants. We've been doing that in some of the states and the cities. But then the politicians generally don't have a say on this, and thankfully so. They are okay with these kind of parameters at the moment. And in terms of transparency, there is like I said, these are enshrined. Eventually, all of this has to become a part of the development regulations and building bylaws. So they have a process of public consultation where all these regulations are put out in the public domain. People are invited to give their suggestions and comments, if any. And then these are addressed and incorporated. So as far as meeting people's requirements, there is a process. How efficient it is and whether it's able to capture all the needs and requirements and concerns is still a question.
Thank you.
So another question, Alokana. Can form-based codes be used to improve airflow and ventilation, ensuring individual buildings have a fresh air supply to reduce the risk of airborne disease? For example, by regulating separation between the buildings.
Possible.
And leaving corridors for transit of air across a city to help reduce urban heat island effect and to disperse air pollution. Very good question.
Yes. So, in fact, I said that we worked with the Indian Railways and then the NIUA. The works for Indian Railways were very specific to the railway sites. And the work for NIUA was specific to how these tools can be implemented across cities. So when we were looking at railways, we had the opportunity of looking at these kind of green building requirements. And we also created a set of requirements for the railway commercial development within the railway stations and how they have to meet some of these parameters. I don't have those set of slides at the moment, but I'll be happy to explain that in another session if there is a need. Yes, it can be done. In fact, a lot of cities are integrating green building norms, and form-based codes can definitely add a lot of value and make it more realistic in terms of adoption. So yes, that's actually a very relevant and pertinent point of discussion.
True. Definitely, we would love to have more discussion on that since the questions are really encouraging. The other question is, I guess from your MLCP pictures, in the UK, retail is not permitted in the MLCP for reason of safety and the risk of explosion in enclosed parking structures.
That's a fair point. I mean, the safety concerns are definitely very important. But there are examples in India where MLCPs have been used and integrated with commercial development. At the moment, we are not giving exact set of regulations for MLCP. But the fact that MLCPs also need to be integrated with the kind of development that exists over there and the requirements of the place. So certain cities may not need commercial within the MLCP, which is fine. But certain cities, you don't have an option. You have to introduce commercial, whether it's next to the MLCP, whether it's bundled with the MLCP, whether it's on top of the MLCP. I mean, these are the questions that now need to be explored when these specific norms are being created. But yes, safety concerns definitely are serious concerns.
Yeah. I think with the MLCP, especially when it comes to public transport-oriented development, we've seen that it needs a retail component because of the services and amenities, right? So we've seen in the airports across the country and also in different countries that retail becomes a vitable part of that commercial component and also to enhance the facility component within the form. There's another question from Vishaka. Vishaka, I will let you open your mic. Homogenization. Are you there, Vishaka? Or else I just say that homogenization is generally a global phenomenon in architecture interiors. I think we can definitely take up some inspiration from Western city in terms of public realm equity.
Agreed. I mean, that's a suggestion and I totally buy into it. It's just that sometimes, like I said earlier, to explain it to the Indian audience, we had to very categorically use Indian examples in this particular case, specifically for cities. So that's the reason why we use these kind of images. But yes, there's a lot to learn from Western and even South Asian examples.
Yes.
I mean, Thailand also gives us a very good mix of form-based parameters. I've been there. I've been to Sri Lanka. Sri Lanka gives us different sets of examples. Nepal, yes. China, I haven't been, so I can't talk about China. But there are areas where we can learn from. So yes, it's possible.
Okay, Southeast Asian cities, its streets are characterized and associated with term messy urbanism. And how does form-based code fit into the messy urbanism?
With the kind of population that South Asian cities have, it's very difficult to not keep it messy. It's very difficult. And the kind of income disparity, cultural diversity we have, it's very difficult. But still, if we as urban designers can identify and pick out those elements which are essential to enhance the efficiency of the form, I think our job is done. The city anyways evolves over a period of time. Maybe tomorrow when the population is normalized or reaches a certain equilibrium and the growth is also maintained and we have lesser income disparity, probably the cities would be less messier. That's my assumption. I don't know. I mean, I can't help it. It's messy, so it's messy.
True, definitely a cultural layer and disparity between the incomes. And also, hence the first question I mentioned, has that been transferred from that perspective to the planning authority to the infrastructure as well? So a long way to go.
But there is one catch to this. Messy urbanism, I mean, honestly, it's good for a discussion amongst the professionals. But the moment we use this kind of phrase to a stakeholder, we are actually judging them for the way they are. So it's not a very good word for the stakeholders. But yes, for us, there's no harm in calling it messy urbanism.
But sure, we enjoy this messy urbanism. We are so
True.
used to it. Yeah.
True.
It's like we find our way out within this messy urbanism and really feel like sense of place within this context also.
Very true.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Thanks,
Okay.
Bharti, for joining.
And the other question from Manju, where can I find examples of FBC implemented in TOD precincts in India?
Okay. Examples in the sense it's already integrated with the bylaws. So if you look at the recent UP bylaws, it was published, I think, in July last year and then updated in November. So UP bylaws now has a lot of these parameters. It's all over the place. It's not in one particular section. So build to line is now mandatory in a lot of mixed use and TOD areas. Active frontages are now mandatory. Then the UP TOD policy mentions that the cities have to prepare zonal development plans, and the zonal development plans can then introduce other sets of urban design guidelines. The policy talks about that. So in Meerut, we were able to introduce a lot of these kind of urban design parameters for specific zones, including heritage areas and historic areas. So that's already there. The draft document was published. The process is still going on. Once all the comments are incorporated, then it will be published as the final set of documents. So that will be available. Delhi bylaws and Delhi TOD policy. So that also talks about this. Gujarat bylaws has a lot of these parameters built into it. In Gujarat, you also have Sabarmati, which has a lot of these. There is a local area plan for Sabarmati area. I've seen that. That has a lot of these parameters, even passages through plots, etc. They are there. These are the ones that I have seen. I am familiar. I am aware that Tamil Nadu was also doing a lot of work on this. They were integrating these in their bylaws. And it's good that they integrate in their bylaws because the local authorities understand the legality of all of this. So they know where to put it. We as external agencies, we sometimes don't understand the legal nuances of these development regulations and bylaws. It's better that the local authorities do it. So these were some of the examples. And I think even Mumbai has done some work. I haven't seen it. So maybe that's another example that you can look at.
Great. I'll open the floor for Gonzalo. He has put a question. Gonzalo, can you put your mic on and ask your question?
Yeah, hello. Can you hear me?
Yes, perfect.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, very interesting conversation here. And actually now exploring the use of codes in England now, particularly at the public-private interface. Was something that you were discussing in the chat. So yeah, my it's more than a question. It's just a reflection about probably the challenges that we will have when we try to develop, high quality interfaces, because it's kind of difficult territory when the private and public domain meet, and how those forces, connect and actually, lead to that high quality idea. So I just wondering about how you see all those issues in your kind of hybrid codes of approach that you commented in the presentation, or probably any insight about that.
See, in India, it's slightly more challenging because we are looking at currently when this whole discussion started with regards to form-based codes, the cities were not even prepared to understand what is form-based codes. So we could not give them very specific prescriptive codes for the cities. We could just introduce certain parameters and let the city explore with it and play with it. Some of the parameters the cities could understand, was easier for them, which got adopted immediately. The rest, they are still in process of adopting. So, I mean, I think we are too far behind in terms of regulating development and prioritizing quality with reference to UK and other parts of the world. But we chose very specifically to not be very prescriptive with the cities. And then the cities explore and integrate it. And by the way, they've been very successful with this. It's not that they've failed. They've been successful because the moment they do these things, they are able to enhance the revenues from the plot. Cities do understand which parameter will give them revenues. And the moment you discuss the parameters vis-a-vis revenues being generated from them, immediately the listener actually gets interested. If it's only about parameter and efficiency and form, a lot of listeners and a lot of people who are working on these things, they are not able to associate with these dialogues. So for them, say for example, if it's the development authority, they associate with money. If it was, say for example, an environment authority, the environmental benefits of the form would have helped them understand this. So we choose our language accordingly. That's what we've been doing.
Thank you. Thank you, Adarsha.
Let next Kajal to open the mic. There's a question from her.
Yes, hi. Am I audible?
Yes, you are.
My question to you is that since we are discussing different bylaws that are being implemented in the entire country, there is some form of reluctance from the general public that they do not wish to follow these codes. According to your experience, what are those reasons that we can discuss upon?
And you are right. The resentment is mostly in the northern part of the country, Delhi NCR. In places like Kolkata, Mumbai, I'm familiar that even in Hyderabad, Ahmedabad, these norms are actually the way of life. People are easily adopting to these norms. Delhi NCR, because the original planning or the historical planning in these particular areas post-independent was mostly driven by a different set of planning regulations, and people are now accustomed to that. So there we are definitely facing problems, but other parts it's been easier. Even for that matter, Kerala, they understand these parameters very quickly. They don't have so much of resentment. I mean, we've not faced that much of resentment over there.
Great. Next question I'll take from Tanuja. Are you there, Tanuja? Okay, I'll say it. Are there any form-based codes or guideline which talk about integrating existing villages, Gauthans, with new developments? Few examples, if you have in mind.
So this is a gray area even now. I am also not familiar, and as far as I know, the current planning systems don't really acknowledge any response to villages and Gauthans. So that's a gray area. I'm not aware of any of the regulations for these areas. There are some in Mumbai, but I'm not very clear about the impact of or the role of form-based codes in it. Sorry.
The question from Abhijit. Are you there, Abhijit?
Yes, I am.
Okay, please go ahead with your question.
Hi, Adarsh. My question is, how much of this Sabarmati type development, riverfront development, meet the environmental codes?
Okay, so let me clarify. I was not talking about the Sabarmati River, but there is an area next to Sabarmati, which was essentially larger bungalows and even some multi-tenanted residential block. So they took up that whole area to create form-based regulations for that. I was referring to that. The river itself is a different discussion altogether. And yes, there are a lot of environmental concerns with the way river edge has been treated.
Thank you.
I'll take up next question from KS Shrikant.
By the way, this is a discussion forum, so anyone wants to add anything, please feel free to express.
Please, yeah,
You don't have to
definitely.
restrict.
Question. There are a few questions from Vijay as well. Vijay.
Yes, what about earthquake preparedness? Because the whole of the Indian subcontinent is prone to earthquakes. Is that sort of been ignored in these form-based codes, or does it have to? Does every sort of code have to meet these earthquake mitigation criteria?
So the building bylaws currently in India are very strong with regards to the earthquake resilient design. Even the National Building Code now, it's replaced with another new set of codes. They're very strong with regards to the needs, safety requirements, and other kinds of codal requirements for earthquake resilient design. As a result, the form-based codes do not touch upon that, and they don't even challenge that, because those have been actually very effective, provided it's being followed and it's being regulated efficiently.
Yeah, I was just thinking about the Kobe kind of earthquake in Japan, where one thing on paper, something else is actually built. I mean, how's it sort of checked up on?
That's a problem in India as well. So what's written on the document sometimes are not followed on the ground. So, but it's there. The provision is there, and because building bylaws are mandatory for any kind of building sanction, people are supposed to follow it. So it's there. In fact, fire safety, earthquake resilient design, even wind resilient structures, etc. Those are mandatory codal requirements. And there are more.
Agreed. I'll open. Nicholas Fark has also joined the talk. Nicholas, you're more than welcome to open your mic and have discussion. I'll let you.
Okay, I've enjoyed the presentation very much, but I noticed it tended to focus on the mega cities, who are probably best equipped with professional staff. And I'm concerned about the growth of towns and cities, particularly the medium-sized cities or the peri-urban areas, and the reconciliation between town and country, and the role that trees and nature can play in not only cooling towns, but also making them more livable. So I'm wondering how far these principles on urban form are being taken up in urban extensions and new settlements, which may be in quite rural areas and where the local authorities are relatively small.
At the moment, our focus was the existing towns and the existing core city areas. So we focused on that. In the peri-urban areas, there's still very limited or no work happening with regards to form-based codes. Maybe the next stage would be looking into peri-urban areas, but you are right. Peri-urban areas also require certain kinds of form-based regulations, especially bringing a balance between urbanization and nature. So at the moment, there's no work happening around that.
One last question from K.S. Shrikant.
Hello, am I audible?
Yes, you are. Please go ahead.
Good evening. It was a great presentation. I have two specific questions with respect to in India. How does form-based code integrate vernacular and indigenous urban form into the character? And considering incremental growth and urban parcel agglomeration and subdivision as two main ideas in the way the urban form develops in India, how can form-based code create an adaptable, context-sensitive urban environment while supporting parcel agglomeration and subdivision? And what are the aspects which are considered so that effectively form-based code can address these recurring aspects of subdivision and agglomeration in the case of India?
I'll start with the first one. So traditional cities, whether it's traditional city or whether it's any other part of the city, if you remember one of the slide, I emphasized that the basis of the form-based codes has to be a very robust area-based plan. So, and the area-based plan actually has to acknowledge these form-based parameters of the context. Some of the parameters we could list out, there could be more. In fact, the ones with regards to architecture and the architectural language of the place has not been touched upon in this particular presentation, but that's a separate discussion altogether. Those norms are also there. So if the city authority is able to prepare that kind of an area plan, which creates a set of regulations for those areas, then yes, it can be done. If not, then it's very difficult for someone to prepare it. Honestly, form-based codes cannot happen without a very good planning and an urban design scheme. That has to come in first. Then it can be broken down into various regulations and codes. We just simplified the process and listed out things to do. The second question that you had was about, I think, the urban extensions. Am I right? Can you repeat the second question once?
The two aspects which are recurring in urbanization in India is this parcel subdivision and parcel agglomeration, which is very common. You take any part. So now, how does form-based codes support these phenomenon?
Actually, form-based codes does not have a take on land amalgamation per se. So whether it's amalgamation or subdivision, see, traditionally, amalgamation and subdivision were perceived as processes where how much to be built could be controlled. Now, form-based codes has moved beyond that and is talking about quality of the development. So whether it's a smaller plot or a larger plot, certain basic parameters would still have to be followed. With that philosophy, in the current context, form-based codes does not touch upon the issues of amalgamation of land and subdivision. In fact, our studies, not from the form-based codes perspective, but from other TOD and other kinds of policy perspectives, we've realized that some amount of amalgamation and subdivision of land should be encouraged in the city because it makes the area market friendly. The market sometimes tells you or gives indications of the kind of demands in the area. So subdivision and amalgamation can actually be used to understand market as well. So that's my answer.
Sir, but how is it integrating? Like, if there is a larger, is there a ceiling for these kind of amalgamations to apply from
Not
FBC?
No, nothing. Whether you
Or
amalgamate or
minimum?
subdivide, there's no problem.
So my thinking is like, should it be there, or how can it be done with FBC?
At the moment, see, amalgamation or subdivision can govern the quantum of development. That's how Indian regulations are and Indian bylaws are. They don't affect the quality. And we don't need to add this layer into quality and make it further complicated. In fact, the volumetric discussion happening in the FAR ground coverage and setback and height restriction norms are fair. They're okay. There's no problem with that. If cities want to increase the FARs and all, that's fine. This is another layer of regulations on top of it, which just enhances the quantum of development that is already been allowed in the development regulations. So there's no conflict between the two. At least I don't see any conflict between the two.
I hope your question is answered. I think we've got a couple of more questions, but however, we'll take them on to our social page and try to answer them, considering if anyone is willing to share their own experience on this subject, we're more than happy rather than a question. For a quick 2-3 minutes. I believe that's it. And thank you everyone for joining us. It's been really, and Adarsha, it's been really a good insight, especially when it comes from the project approach and implementation on ground. And I would also thank all the participants who have joined us. and the question which made really discussion ongoing. And I would apologize. There are a few questions I may have missed. However, we'll just go through once we go offline and try to answer through our social media page, probably LinkedIn. Feel free to reach out on LinkedIn or get the subject going with anything you have in mind and in on the subject. We'll take it from there. Thank you, everyone. Thank you so much for joining.
Thank you, everyone. See you later. Bye.